Welcome in, everybody. I'm Sean Tempest. I'm host of the Morning Blend on Channel 13 and afternoons on Mix 94.1. And it is my pleasure to be here today to present the second Conversations with Norm. Now, today's show is a fundraiser with all proceeds benefiting the Smith Center Education and Outreach Programming Fund. Both Norm, Rita Rudner, and myself, we are donating our time to bring this exciting interview series to you. Before I introduce our celebrities, first I'd like to take a moment to thank and acknowledge our supportive and generous sponsors who have made all of this possible, including the people that sign my paychecks, Channel 13. A little more of an applause for them. This time is not by itself. Clear Channel Outdoor, Jerry Metellus Photography, love that man. Las Vegas Review Journal, Sammy's Wood-Fired Pizza, Southern Wine and Spirits, and The Link. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Yeah. Let's do it. He's the celebrity columnist for the Las Vegas Review Journal. He's been voted Best Print Journalist by RJ Readers in the poll in 2013 and 2014. And she's a comedy legend who's currently appearing at the Venetian. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Norm Clark and Miss Rita Rudner.
Well, thank you all for coming out. I can't thank you enough. Love being in this great venue. It's such a pleasure to have Rita here today. I wanted her because I think she's got one of the most fascinating show business stories I've ever heard. She went from chorus lines to punch lines, and I think we'll just get right into it. If I recall, you started ballet at 4. Grew up in Miami. Tell her how the ballet developed.
First of all, I just want to say how happy I am to be in air conditioning. Let's all stay here for a couple weeks. Okay. But my mom started me in ballet when I was 4 years old, and she actually wanted to be a dancer. And her father didn't think it was a dignified profession, and he should know because he was a night watchman. So, I don't know what he thought of it, but he would let her go into show. She happened to be very limber, and when I started ballet, I found out I was really limber. So right off the bat, I could put my leg up here, do turns and things, and people kind of paid more attention to me because I was good at something, so I just kept on doing it.
And at that point, I believe your mother had a lingering illness.
Yes.
You lost your mother when you were 13.
Yes.
And 15, after graduating at 15.
Yes.
You decided to go to New York City to
Yes.
dance on Broadway.
I know, isn't that stupid? But I did. But what happened was I was dancing professionally. Well, I was in a ballet company, first of all. I was in ballet. You want to hear my jokes, too? Because you have to write jokes from your personal experience. And so I wrote a joke, and I wasn't really very good in ballet in Swan Lake. I was the lifeguard. It was one of my first jokes, because you have to start from where you are, and I didn't have the arches to really excel in ballet. I had turns, I had extension, I had jumps, I had everything, but you need extraordinary arches to really get it. So I didn't get any of the ballet scholarships at my ballet school. And I said, well, I like other kinds of dancing too. So because my mother was sick and my father was uninvolved, he let me, I used to read the newspaper, and I found out there was an audition in Miami Beach at the Doral Hotel for Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. And he let me skip my last 3 weeks of, I think it was the 10th grade, and I was already young for my class. Anyway, I took 3 buses to go to the audition in Miami Beach. I got the job in Stop the World, I Want to Get Off at the Doral Hotel. And I made $100 a week. And that was my first professional job. So from then on, I was just hooked by the Broadway dream. I just wanted to be on Broadway. And when I did 11th and 12th grades together, I was 15, and I just took a plane and went. It's not, I would never let my daughter do that. And my dad was so weird, you know, he said, bring a sweater. He didn't worry I was going to get killed, he worried I was going to catch a cold.
So walk us through where you lived, what your daily...
Well, I'd been to New York with my best friend and her mother the year before. And I took ballet class, I found a jazz class, I found a tap class, and I knew the subway system, I knew the train system, and I had figured out that there was a women's hotel. And it was only for women. It's called the Barbizon Hotel for Women. And I found it because it was next to Bloomingdale's. And I spent a lot of time in Bloomingdale's. And I said, what's that? Here's a hotel for women. I should look into this because when I live here, you know, this is what I thought. This is where I should live. So I took a plane and I said, Dad, I'm going to live at the Barbizon Hotel for Women. And he said, well, okay, no college. I said, no, I'm not going on. This is it. I'm going to go on Broadway. So he did support me for a couple months until I got my first show, which was Zorba on the road. And when I was 16, I went on the road with the road company of Zorba with Rita Rudner and John Ray. And I was the swing girl. And I didn't know what that was because I was non-equity. So I had auditioned as a non-equity performer. It's so hard to get on Broadway, the non-equity performer. So they said, you're the swing. And I said, okay. I didn't know, I thought I really swung in on the road. But I wanted to be in show business so badly. I said, whatever I have to swing on, I'll learn how to swing, you know? And then I found out that I had to learn everybody's parts. When you're a swing girl, no matter who is sick, you have to know what they do. There were 6 other dancers. And it was such great training, you know, to go in for anybody when they were sick, and you took notes about what they wear, their entrances and exits and everything, and that was my first Broadway show, and then I was an equity performer.
And did you say that was a 1-year tour?
Yeah, 1 year.
And
I went all over the country, had the best time.
San Francisco, you talked about renting a house.
Yeah.
And somebody came and entertained you guys.
Yes. Well, John Ray had a daughter named Bonnie Ray who was just starting to sing. And a couple of the guys at the show had rented this house in Mill Valley. And one day, this very, very hippie kind of charming woman, young girl showed up with this massive red hair. And she used to sing for us on the balcony. And John Ray used to say, that's Bonnie, she's going to be a famous singer someday. And sure enough, she's just one of the most talented women I've ever, I just think she's fantastic.
So the tour ends, and it's back to New York.
Back to New York, I went and I got an apartment with one of the girls in the show in one of the worst neighborhoods you can imagine, Columbus Avenue and 84th Street. I don't know how I wasn't murdered 3 times. I'm telling you, I'm so sad, and I worry about my daughter going outside, but you just have to pray, you know. And I was a young kid, I didn't know any better. I'd walk home. My first Broadway show, I got Promises, right when I got back from Zorba. So I was in a show called Promises with Lorna Luft, and she was just, she was a year older than I was. I was 17 and she was 18 or something. She was making her Broadway debut, and it was the end run of Promises, and David Merrick was a really good promoter, and he was always thinking of things to keep the show alive. And he said, it's Judy Garland's other daughter, she's coming in. And certainly Judy Garland certainly was her mother, because a lot of times she had a headache at intermission and didn't go on. For the second act, and the understudy would go on. But it was just, again, it was wonderful. I just remember all of the, being with some of the best dancers on Broadway, and I remember Bayork Lee, who was later in Chorus Line, and I just loved it. But I would walk home. I would get impatient. I wouldn't wait for the 104, the bus, and I would just walk home at night in Columbus. I'm crazy, but luckily I'm here.
Well, this was, I recall, a magical time to be in New York. The Mets, the Jets, I know you're a big Knicks fan, but the the shows that were going on at the time, Hair, Old Calcutta.
And all the Michael Bennett, Galway Champion, Peter Gennaro, and Bob Fosse. It was just the greatest time. I'm so excited that I got to be a part of it.
And I think that you, with so many options there, you found somebody a show that you really liked.
Oh yeah. Well, that was when I became the biggest Stephen Sondheim fan. What I would do was they had invented this great thing called Tickets for Tonight, where you could get half-price tickets in 42nd Street and wait there. And so whenever I wasn't in a show, I would stand and get half-price tickets, and I would see all of the greatest shows. I saw the shows that no one ever saw because they only lasted one night. I saw a show called Truck. Who would have seen a show called Truck? Took place about. I saw Moose Murders. Because anything that was available, if all the good shows were, you just go to a show. And I lived right across from Lincoln Center, and I got standing room for Gelsey Kirkland and Baryshnikov for the American Ballet Theater in New York City. It was just the greatest time. I had a great time. And right from Promises, because Michael Bennett did Promises, I got in one of the best shows, I think, that has ever been created, called Follies. So I got to I was the first replacement in Follies, and I replaced a really talented dancer called Graziella Danielle, who went on to choreograph lots of Broadway shows. And I got to work with Michael Bennett and Hal Prince. It was just terrific.
Give us a rundown of the other shows that followed.
Well, I kind of made a little bit of a mistake in Follies because I was 18, and Michael Bennett wanted to bring Follies to Los Angeles, and I didn't know how to drive because I was too young to learn how to drive in Miami when I left. And in New York, you don't have to know how to drive. You have to know how to take buses and subways and taxis. And so he said he wanted me to go. He wanted me to be one of the ones who opened the show in Los Angeles, and it was a big deal. And I said, but I don't know how to drive. And he said, well, you can learn. I said, no, I'm too scared. I can't go to Los Angeles. And he got so angry at me that I wouldn't go to Los Angeles with Follies, and I wanted to stay in New York. So his next show was Chorus Line. And he said, guess who's not going to be in But you know what? I wouldn't have been in Chorus Line anyway, because the way they created Chorus Line was you had to go and be in a series of interviews about your life, and then they took your life and they manipulated it, and it was gut-wrenching, and I didn't want my gut-wrenching life to be it just wasn't me at that point. So I thought that it was okay. So eventually he offered me one of the leads in Chorus Line if I'd go on the road. And I said I didn't want to go on the road. So I never worked for Michael Bennett again. But that was okay. But that was okay because I got Mac and Mabel, and I worked for Galway Champion. And I always wanted to do a Broadway show from the beginning. So, because I came into the road company of Zorba, and I came into the end of Promises. I was the first replacement of Follies. I said, now the next thing I want to do, I want to do a show from the start. So I did Mac and Mabel from the first day of rehearsal till it closed. And boy, what a learning experience that was. Do you know that Bernadette Peters wasn't the first Mabel? It was a different girl, and she had a wonderful voice. I can't remember her name, because she never did anything again. And it was the first week, and they discovered she had a great voice, and she just couldn't act. And after the first week of the Broadway rehearsals for Mac and Mabel, all of a sudden Bernadette appeared, and Bernadette, of course, can do everything. So, she was just terrific. But I do an impression of Bernadette, if you'd like to hear it.
Very good, yes, of course.
So, because she's got that little voice. And it was, Mac and Mabel was a story about Mac Sennett and Mabel Norman. And Mabel Norman was his girlfriend, and she was on drugs, and she was unhappy, and it was it was the first feel-bad musical. fine, because then we got Les Mis, you know, and then, but it was really, that's why it won't die, because it's still just a great, great show. So at the Max Sennett breaks up with Mabel, and the second act opened up with Bernadette Peters, like on the corner of that little balcony up there, and there was a spotlight on her, and she had on a gorgeous sequin dress. Hello, and she's very voluptuous, and we had a whole orchestra, and Jerry Herman wrote the music, who I just think is a genius, and the spotlight hit her, and the music swelled, and she sang, "Toy heels Tuesday, Thursday." And it just was a gorgeous voice, wasn't really right for that ballad. But anyway, so that's my impression of Bernadette Peters. And then what happened was, it was mixed reviews. I remember waiting for the reviews on top of the one of the restaurants on top of one of the big office buildings, and it was mixed, and it was just so upsetting. And then there was there weren't enough Broadway theaters for the musicals that were coming in, and The Wiz was a huge hit, and it was coming in, and they needed a theater, and they just would, you could go below your nut, which is what you need to sustain your weekly costs. The theater, for a certain number of weeks, the theater could kick you out. And that's what happened to us. We went below our nut, and they went, ha! We could get them out now. And we closed, and The Wiz came in. It was a big hit.
How long was that?
Didn't run very long. I can't remember, like 6 months or something. It wasn't a very long run, but it was fantastic. And then after that, I got into what I consider was the most wonderful show I'd ever been in, because it was across the street from my house. And it was a terrible show. It was called So Long 174th Street. Starred Bobby Morse, who was coming off How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And it was directed by Bert Sheveloff, who was a wonderful theater director. And Stan Daniels, who was one of the writers of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, was writing his first music, and he did the music. And it was terrible. It shouldn't be on Broadway, but somehow, I'll just sing you one of the songs. It's so nice being with you, being with you, being with you. It's so nice being with you. I wish it would never end. I wish it would just go on until there are never clouds to wish upon. It's so, you can sew it close. And I said, this show's never going to run, and it's across the street from my house. So upsetting. And it was the Harkness Theater, which was by Rebecca Harkness, and the whole theater closed, and then that was it. And then I said, now I'm going to have to take a bus to work again. And then I did. I had to take a bus. I had gotten the magic show on Broadway.
Early 20s at this point?
Yeah. I was maybe 25, maybe. I was at early 20s.
And Annie came along.
After that, after the magic show was Annie. And then that was my part. Because in Magic Show, I was the standby for the 2 leads in the show. 2 leads? Yeah, 2 leads. And standby is a great job because you don't actually have to go to the theater. You get to stay home, and you call in and say, is everybody in at a half hour? And they go, yeah, everyone's in, and then you can just do what you want to do. But every once in a while, they're not in. And then the one time this girl, Natalie, wasn't in Charmin, I was the lead Charmin. It was the night of the biggest snowstorm in New York. And I called in and I said, you're not going to do the show? And they said, yes, we're doing the show. And I said, but there's no transportation. I had to walk in the snow. There's no one in the audience, but they wouldn't cancel the show. And so that's the bad news of being a standby. But anyway, that was fun. Because I got to work with Stephen Schwartz, who's just written lots of fantastic. Didn't he write The Wiz lately? The music with The Wiz? No, it was Wicked. Wicked, yeah. That was. I got to work with so many great people. And then I got Annie. On Broadway, I got my own part, Lily St. Regis, which Bernadette Peters did in the movie. Isn't that funny? So there I am again with Bernadette.
I was looking at the timelines on some of these. And in 1977, when Annie was going, there was a great scandal about tickets were now going for $17.50
Oh my God.
for Liza Minnelli's The Act.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
70. Pit tickets are $500 now. Liza Minnelli, who I think is just a fantastic performer. And I just remember, that's when I started getting the comedy urge. I said, comedy is really... I just remember this one moment in the act, and it wasn't a good... I said, it's a good thing they didn't call it the show, because it was just an act. But there's this one bit, I'll just do... No, can we reenact it?
Of course.
Okay, so, and it was just the most perfect joke. So, Liza Minnelli was sitting, and somebody was massaging her shoulders, and this is what happened. And she said, okay, so I'm going to sit here, you massage my shoulders. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, I wish she would stop doing that.
More.
No, that's what she said. She said, oh, I wish she would stop doing that. And it made me laugh. I said, oh, that's a joke. A joke is something where you think something's going to happen, and then something else happens, but what's happened that you didn't think has happened is still making sense. So that's a joke, and that's really the formula of a joke. And I started thinking of these formulas for jokes, and I really started thinking of formulas for jokes when I went to see, it was a play with Jason Robards, and it was one of those really bad dramas. Martin, what was it?
I was 7.
You were 7. Oh, shut up. One of those things where everyone's an alcoholic. Because I told you I went to see anything on Broadway when I wasn't in. And it was one of these really dark. But
The Iceman coming.
no, it was even worse than that. It was one of these. No, it was worse than that. It was one of these.
Google it with Jason Robards, right?
Jason Robards, and it was on Broadway, and it was an old play by that guy who writes all the depressing plays. Long Day's Journey! That's what it was, Long Day's Journey into night. Yes. And I said, this is so depressing, I've just got to start thinking of jokes. And then I just started thinking, what would a joke be? And then when I was in Annie, I said, I've got this joke. I wanted to see what a joke is. And I started going out to this little club across the street called the Ye Old Trickled Inn, where they played darts and they drank, and the stage was right near the dartboard. But it was I learned that after Annie. I had a fight too with Martin Sharman, who was the creator of Annie. Not really a fight, but I shouldn't tell you this. Never mind. Should I tell you this? I had a problem with the way he wasn't nice to the children, and they're children, and he'd yell at them, and I would get upset, and we would rehearse, and I was part of this thing called the Annie Massacre, where he decided that he had to fire everyone in Annie and bring in a whole new cast, and that's when I got hired to do Louis St. Regis, and so it was not a happy atmosphere anyway, because he left 3 people that were the originals, and then we had this gorgeous little girl, Allison Smith, who was so talented, this big, and all the little girls, they were so gorgeous, and he would just be, and they'd cry, and I hated it. So I didn't like to sit down in the place where we were rehearsing, and I'd always go up to my dressing room. So whenever it was time, he would have to call me and come down, and I would have to, and we just didn't get along. And I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be who I am by myself, and that's when I started writing jokes.
And if I recall, there's a soap story.
Yeah, I was reading the New York Times, because I didn't go to school, so every day I did the New York Times. And I went to high school, not to college. I would read the New York Times, every section, except the sports section, but every other section. And I would just, read it. Because it was, what a better education can you get? Well, at that point, it was 25 cents. You don't have to go to college, you have to read the New York Times every day. So I read it every day, and I was reading the business section. And I said, I've noticed there was a new product called soft soap. And the creator of soft soap said, I analyzed the situation, and when you want to bring in a new product, you can either go in and try and be better than a product that has been there for millions of years in an area that's very crowded, or you can invent a product that stands by itself and has no competition. And I thought, well, what area in show business has not no competition, but not a lot of competition. And I came up with comedy because there were only 2 female comedians I was aware of, and Joan Rivers and Phyllis Diller, and they were fantastically talented, but there were only 2 of them. And I said, you know, gosh, how many dancers and singers and actresses are there? And there are only 2 female comedians. I'm going to go and try that. So that's how I started trying it.
And going to an audition must have been a terrible thing as far as looking for a job in dancing.
Oh, it's terrible. You know, you have to be the right size, and they go, you, not you. It's just, you know, it's demeaning. I mean, I did loads of commercials, and I did lots of commercials for different things. And the amount of times I would get rejected did not make up for, I mean, the amount of times I was accepted did not make up for the amount of times I was rejected. So I said, I've just got to be more in charge. I remember once I got a job and I had to wash my hair, and I got thrown out because I had a mole right here. You know, and I said, that's not fair. Once I got a hair commercial, and I was the before, and they brought in another girl for the after. I said, this is really humiliating. I just don't want to be a part of it. And I want to be a whole person, not an object. So that's when I said, I'm going to just start, I'll start to be who I am. And then I said, who do I think is funny? Who makes me laugh? And I was so lucky because I lived in Manhattan. And they had film festivals. And I decided, because when I was taking ballet lessons and things, because I was, you know, crazy dancer. But all of a sudden, next door to me was the Buster Keaton Film Festival. And I would go every afternoon and watch Buster Keaton movies. And then they had Jacques Tati around the corner, or, you know, on 57th Street, and Jacques Tati. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And then Woody Allen, and they'd have the Woody Allen, and I would go, and then I'd say, there's a library across the street, because it was Lincoln, and I said, I'm going to listen to all these old comedy records. And I got to listen to George Burns, and then I went to the Museum of Broadcasting and started looking at old Jack Benny shit, and I just decided to go on my own little comedy course. So I did. Every day I went to comedy school.
Did you take notes?
Yeah.
Copious notes? And do you still have those somewhere?
Yeah, oh yeah. We have like lots of books in the house of things that I don't know why I wrote them down, but I would diagram jokes and go, well, here's the switch. You know, here's where this comes, and here's where this ties into this joke at the beginning, and then so I didn't I started like from ground zero. You can't start any lower than I start. But in ballet, you don't do a jump, you point your foot. And then you learn first position, second position, third. You just have to start from basics. So I did the same thing. And everyone in the comedy club thought it was crazy. You know, because everyone really, in comedy, I don't know now, but it's more fly by the seat of your pants. Is this funny? I'll say it on stage, I think it's funny. But I did that too, but I kind of had more of a scientific approach.
Did you have a mentor?
Well, I love Woody Allen's joke writing. I love Jack Benny's character, because I love the fact that he didn't look like he was going to be funny. You know, he looked like he was your banker. He was really funny, and he never tried to be funny. And I love Woody Allen because the way he wrote a joke was the best. He was the best comedy writer. So they were the people that I kind of studied. But as far as advice, I got some very bad advice when I first started from an agent in a big agency, saying they saw me at Catch a Rising Star and said I should put a big bow on my head and just talk about how I wanted to get married. And I said, well, that's bad. I'm not going to do that. And then she didn't take me on as a client, but I don't care. And then the best advice I ever got was for my husband, Martin Bergman, who actually saw me at Catch a Rising Star in the mid-'80s, and he produced comedy shows, and he was looking to bring a comedy show to the Edinburgh Festival in Scotland. And he thought it was funny, which meant he had good taste, first of all. And he said, why are you dressed like a cowgirl? And I said, because this is what I wear. And I had on these big fry boots.
Oh.
And remember fry boots?
I still have them.
Yeah, see, I love them.
They're
green. They're what?
Green.
They're green. You have green ones. Oh, you're a little bit more adventurous than I am. And I had on a Ralph Lauren jean skirt and kind of high cut wrap. Anyway, so he said, "Why are you dressed like a nun?" And I said, "A Western nun." And then he said, and he started saying, "Why don't you wear something pretty?" And so he has much better taste than I do, and he started picking out dresses. And that's kind of what became my signature, was that I was the comedian who wore a pretty dress.
Did your, how much the style you have now, where, at what point did you develop this style, or did you just glom on to the style you have and just keep perfecting it?
I just started with the truth. And that's another Mel Brooks thing that I read, because I used to go read lots of comedy books and like Freud's analysis of comedy, and it doesn't make any sense. But I read it to see if there was anything in there. Because what you do is you just take little bits that you think you can apply to what you want to do. That's like a recipe. I can't follow every ingredient, you know. I'm just going to have to make it with the things that are available. But anyway, so he said, if you don't, because you stare at a piece of white paper and it's a very scary thing. So he always said, start from the truth, at least you've started. So you've written something on the paper. So I started with, I come from a typical middle-class Jewish family. We were very wealthy. We weren't very wealthy, but it seemed like a good end, a punchline to the joke. But I started with, I come from a typical middle-class Jewish family, because that's where I started. I was not good in ballet, the lifeguard. I wasn't the lifeguard, but anyway, so that's kind of the first step in comedy. And then I'm still trying to figure out new ways to be funny. You know, I want to be able to tell stories. You want to keep making it more organic. You know, it never stops.
Where was that first break?
The first break was, I was a Catch a Rising Star, and they were doing the Catch a Rising Star, I think it was the 20th anniversary special, Martin, or the 25th, or something in the 20s. And I got picked by HBO, who came and auditioned all the comedians, to do 5 minutes as introducing a new comedian. I couldn't believe it, because I hadn't been doing comedy that long. I only had 5 minutes. And they said, you can do this 5 minutes on the show. And okay. And I went there, and it was a film to Catch a Rising Star, and it was Robin Williams and Billy Crystal, and Pat Benatar was the singer. And there was a very, very avant-garde comedian called Andy Kaufman, who was in it. And so I remember being in the trailer, and I was waiting, and I was supposed to go on after Andy Kaufman. And Pat was one of the producers. Pat Lee came, and she said, I can't do this to you. You have to go on before Andy Kaufman. He's rehearsing in the other trailer, and he's going to destroy the audience, and you're not going to be able to follow him. So just come with me now quietly, and I will put you on before Andy Kaufman. So sweet. Wasn't that the sweetest thing? And I did really well, and my set went, I was still dressed as a cowgirl, if you ever find it anywhere. Before Martin, it was still my cowgirl days. And then Andy Kaufman came on after me and had a fight with his manager, and a pretend fight in the audience, and disrupted, and you know, the way he did, and I was so grateful to her that she let me go on before him.
When did the Johnny Carson show come along?
Well, first after that I met David Letterman, which was, he was wonderful, and I did that over and over and over. And then when I moved to California, I auditioned for The Tonight Show, and the booker said, you're just not right for The Tonight Show. And you will never be on The Tonight Show. Just so happened, he had a girlfriend who was right for The Tonight Show. Who was on The Tonight Show every couple months. I won't say her name because you never heard of her again. And he just refused to let me on The Tonight Show. So I said, I won't be on The Tonight Show. I'll still have a career. I'd love to meet Johnny Carson, but that's the way it is. So one night, I'm in the Improv, because I used to go to the Improv every night in Los Angeles, and it's my turn to go on stage. And this booker was in the audience, and Bud Friedman, who owns the Improv, and has a lovely wife called Alex Friedman. And Alex and this booker were sitting at a table, and I was going to get on, and the booker just stood up and started to leave. And Alex Friedman said to him, "Why are you doing this? This girl is so funny. Just sit here and listen to her and stop being such a stupid person." And so she just did it. And because she doesn't care, she's not a comedian, and she just was so angry that it had been so many years that whenever I got on, this guy left. So I guess he'd broken up with this girl, and he thought I might be right for the Tonight Show. Yeah, and that's it. So but I didn't get on it. I got canceled 2 or 3 times because they ran out of time. So my first booking was actually called The Bump Show, where it was 3 comedians who'd been bumped over and over and over and on because Johnny Carson decided, and Johnny Carson was so sweet to me, and I did the show I don't know how many times after that, and they'd just call me all the time if somebody fell out. They'd say, "Rita, can you come over and be on it?" And he'd come over and say hello to me in the dressing room, and he was just very, very sweet to me. So it took a long time, but it was worth it.
What's the craziest thing that happened backstage at a Johnny Carson show or some other show that you went on?
Well, the crazy things were I just sit in a room by myself, and I act like I'm on another planet, and I just concentrate about what I'm going to say, because what happens is you're allowed 5 minutes, and if you don't do those, if you go 6 minutes, they'll just cut you off, and if you go 4 minutes, you don't go on again. You have to do 5 minutes. And then sometimes they don't have exactly 5 minutes, and you're in the middle of a joke, and they'll hold up a card saying, "Wind it up." And that happens a lot. So you kind of I sat in a room, and I would just go over every different situation about where, if they might stop me here, how I would end, if I might stop me there, what I would say, and I just go into my own land. And I don't really pay attention to anything else. And I still do that. People say, "Can you have dinner with me before the show?" And I go, "No." Because I sit there with my notebook and I go, "Well, if this happens, I'll do this. And if that happens, I'll do that." And, you have to focus.
Were you hitting Vegas at that time? Did this lead to?
Well, the first time I played Vegas, I played the Riviera. And I played the Improv for Bud Friedman. And it was before Martin and I were married, so we've been married for 26 years. So, I don't know what year that was. Quickly, somebody do math. What year was it? Yeah, I know it was a long time ago. Thank you.
47.
Okay.
1989.
So I was booked to the Riviera, and I was because it was Bud Friedman. I was doing 5 shows a night or something, making $6. And but Martin was a producer. I just worked for him, and I worked for him in Australia, I worked for him in London, worked for him in Scotland. And he would walk up and down the town and say, there's room for kind of a new kind of comedy here. And he was the one who then started saying, why don't you, wasn't it for sure the Copa at the Sands?
It was because the Mirage.
Oh yeah, the Mirage. Oh, but I had been opening, and then I started opening before that, for Julio Iglesias and lots of, people here, and Beach Boys and all over. I was the opening act. But Martin said, you could be a headliner, and the Mirage was opening across the street from the Sands. And it was going to make that bit of town very vibrant, because that was the new big thing. And Martin put me and Jeff Altman together because they wouldn't have just a woman on their own, and they wouldn't have 2 women together, so it had to be a woman and a man, because that's the way it was. And that's when I started headlining in Las Vegas. After that and every time I came, then when I started getting more Johnny Carson stage appearances, then I started to be a headliner on my own after that.
Let's step back a minute and talk about Martin. So you knew him for quite some time.
Knew him for a couple of years before we went out. Yeah, he hired me to do shows here and there, and he had a girlfriend, I had a boyfriend. And one day he hired me to work in Australia, and I had broken up with my boyfriend. And his girlfriend had not moved to Australia. And that was that. And then and then he hired me to do a show, three people. It was me, Richard Jenny, and Larry Ambrose. And we were going to do a new theater, play in a new theater in Queensland, which is like the Gold Coast of Australia. And this show was the biggest bomb that you could ever imagine, because what Martin didn't know was there had been a boycott against building this theater, and the local residents had wanted a dam. And they built a theater, and the taxi drivers were refusing to take people to the theater. And it was just a disaster. Nobody came. And that's how well we got along, was that we got engaged then when I was raising money for him. And I said, I promise we'll make it back. And sure enough, we did. He produced me in Sydney after that, and we got it all back. But I've never seen, just no one would come to this theater. It was so sad. But these things, we were just not aware of the political maneuvers that had gone on before we came.
So he's quite a romantic, I understand. When you guys got married, there was a lot of...
Oh yeah, he's very romantic. Yeah. He said, first we were going to get married one day. Well, first of all, we were living in Los Angeles together, and he looked and he said, you know, my green card's about to expire. Would you like to get married? Who could resist? So the next day we drove to downtown Los Angeles to get married, and he couldn't find a parking space. So he said, I guess we're not going to get married today because there's no parking. I said, well, maybe we can find a meter. He said, no, that's too hard. Let's just not get married today. So then, it's true. So then he actually decided we should get married. He said, let's work backwards. Let's find a good place for a honeymoon. And then let's get married near that place. We couldn't have a wedding because my friends, we're in LA, my friends were in New York and Miami. He's in LA, his friends are in Australia and London. It's too hard. And the last thing I want to do is get in a gown. Like I do every night. And I said, why people are going to be looking at the back of me? That's not the good pit, you know? I think people should get married facing the audience. That's my switch. I don't want people looking at the back of me. So the next time, so he said, he gave me a map and he said, here's a courthouse. If you can find the courthouse, we'll get married today. And anyone who's seen my act knows I can't read a map. And I was practically crying, and I said, you know, you just got to help me here. So finally, I stopped at a gas station, and I had them direct us to the courthouse. And we finally got to the courthouse, and we got married. And then we drove to the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna, and it had just opened. And they knew we just got married and we couldn't afford one of the good rooms. We had booked a room overlooking the pool. We couldn't afford a room overlooking the ocean. And they upgraded us to a suite overlooking the ocean. And we had a lovely, lovely honeymoon. And then we always said one day we were going to buy a beach house somewhere in that area. We're going to be able to afford it. And it took us, 26 years. But we bought a beach house. And we're going to go there in August. And I said, and today that house is worth almost half of what we paid for it.
So Vegas was on
See what
your,
I did there? I started with the truth.
so Vegas was on your radar.
I always had a good time. You know, okay, this is another thing. I love taking like little things and then saying, oh, this applies to me and this is a good thing. So Martin and I, we read a lot of show business books, and we were reading this book by this woman we know who we were working, because we read a lot of movies in Los Angeles, and called Linda Obst, and she wrote one of the greatest titles of any book in the world, I think. The title is Hello, He Lied. Isn't that the best title? I just said, hello, he lied. You can't get a better joke than that. Because it tells you all about the person. It tells you what to expect from this person. And it's just fantastic. Anyway, so she said in her life she'd found it a smoother ride to ride the horse in the direction it's going. So I said, what good advice. Well, for some reason, my horse kept riding to Las Vegas. And every time I would come to Las Vegas, I would have a wonderful time. The audiences were terrific. I loved the city. You know, I loved that it stayed up all night. I loved the way it felt, you know. I mean, when you're a comedian, you're going to a lot of places that you don't want to ever see again. You know, I don't want to see, what's that place in Canada? Winnipeg. Please don't send me there again. You know, so all of a sudden I get to come to Las Vegas and I get to do my show and they pay me. I mean, it's fantastic. So Martin and I, again, he was a student of comedy and he was reading this book. He directed a movie on Showtime called Unfunny Girl, which I played the least funny person in the world. And it was it was a takeoff on Pygmalion, and two old producers decided that they could take somebody who wasn't funny at all and make them funny. The same way Pygmalion, they decided to make the young class. Anyway, so this was this movie that Martin and I wrote and he directed, and Shecky Greene was in it, who to me is one of the funniest guys in the world. And we started reading about Shecky Greene, and Martin noticed that he could play Las Vegas, but he could play it for a really long time because he played a smaller venue. So he wasn't playing these huge, thousands and thousands of seat theaters. He was playing like a 300, 400 seat theater. So Martin started looking around Las Vegas and said, well, my horse is driving here all the time. Let's see what we can find here. And Martin, the first room he found was not a comedy club. It was in the Las Vegas Hilton. It's now called the Shimmer Cabaret. And there was a really good group, I can't remember it was a music room. Christine and the Sting, right. And they were in there, and Martin said, do these doors close? I mean, that's what he does. On our honeymoon, he's walking around the Ritz-Carlton saying, you could do a show in here. We're on our honeymoon, stop it. But anyway, so he booked me in the Hilton, and it was a big hit. And they asked me if I wanted to do, to come permanently over there, but then I got a call from my old friend who I worked for a lot of times, because Dennis Miller and I used to play the MGM together all the time, Richard Stern. He said, I have a room I don't know what to do with, called, and it was the Catch a Rising Star room in the middle, and then they did some kind of game show there, I don't know what it was, and they were negotiating with the Crazy Girls, the French Crazy Girls, whatever they were. Crazy Horse. Yeah, it turned into La Femme.
Yeah.
Crazy Horse. I called them the Naked Whorebacks, but that's just that's just me. That wasn't the name of the show. It goes no further than this. So they couldn't agree on a contract. And Richard said, I don't know what to do with the room. You've just been a huge hit over the Hilton. Do you want to come over to Catch a Rising, to this room, and until we can negotiate? And Martin said, we're there. And that's what happened, is that I started going into that room, and it was a big hit. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks, then 6 weeks. And Martin and I lived in the MGM with our dog Bonkers, our sheepdog, for 6 months. And then the Crazy Girls got their act together. I said, ironically, they were building them dressing rooms.
So, New York comes along.
Well, Felix Rappaport was vice president of the MGM. And he came one night with his wife and Kurt Kerkorian's doctor. And they just had a really good time, and Felix then got promoted to be the president of New York. And he said, "Why isn't Rita here anymore?" And they said, "Because the French Warbacks are over in So then he said, "Well, I'll build Rita a theater," and that's what he did. He built me a theater. And then I was at New York for 5 years.
And you told the story about that your greeting to your dressing room was...
Oh, he was so nice. He decided, he asked me what color that I liked, and he built a whole dressing room. Everything was pink, different shades of pink, and it had a beautiful pink sofa, and he had a great big jar with pink golf balls in it. And one of the first things Molly, because Molly was born, Molly's 12, my daughter, and she came in, and we adopted her, so I had a 2-day maternity leave. And she used to sit in the pink dressing room, and we used to roll pink golf balls all around the carpeting with pink, my dark pink carpeting that clashed with my pink sofa and my pink wall. But it was fantastic. He was just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Now, was that 2000?
Yeah.
So this was right around, then 9/11 came along. How tough was that?
That was bad. I mean, that was just, it's just, who wants to, I remember it was so eerie to look up in Las Vegas and see no planes. And just remember that?
Yeah.
And, it was just, you didn't know what to do, but people couldn't get out, and no one could get in. And I said, well, what are you going to do? People are just stuck in hotels, and everybody's afraid, and Felix and I discussed it, and we said, well, let's try to do a show, because they're just everybody's here. So I did. I got on and I said, this is just one, and again, you start with the truth. You said, this is such a horrible time, let's all just laugh at things that don't really matter, because so much does matter right now, and just to get your mind off of it for an hour and a half might be, good therapy just to try it. And then we just, we try to show from that perspective, and people really responded, because you can't stop everything and just stand there and freeze. You have to keep going. But it was a scary time.
Was it the most difficult? Was there anything more dreadful than that?
Yeah, performing during a fire alarm. No, that was terrible, but you could relate to people. Really, what happened in New York was they couldn't separate the fire alarm in the theater and people were always doing false fire alarms. So, all of a sudden I'm telling my jokes. But and my microphone would go out, and so I finally figured out a way to disconnect the theater. Don't tell the fire department. Because they're very strict. They used to come in because we were such a big hit. Martin kept adding seats everywhere. And the fire department would come in and go, "You can't get down this aisle. You can't." But it's still a scary time. I think times were, much before 9/11. I remember just getting on a plane after that and just crying when they handed me a plastic knife, with dinner, because she said, you're not allowed to have a knife on a plane anymore because everybody's so scared. And it changed the way everybody thought. It was a moment that you can never truly, nothing will ever be the same.
So Molly came along about that time then? Shortly after?
We adopted her in 2000. She's 12, and 2002. We started looking around in 2000. We started the adoption process in Las Vegas, and it worked out really well.
I have to share one of my most embarrassing moments in Las Vegas. I had a hot tip that a headliner on the Strip, female headliner on the Strip, was expecting. So I just happened to be at Wolfgang Puff's one day, and there's Rita. And I go, I wonder if it's Rita. Now, this is not something I would ever do, except I had to get a column done that day, and I didn't have to get. So I said to Rita, There's a rumor going around that there's a headliner on the strip that's pregnant. Would it be you? She goes, no, but I'll get back to you when I tell you something. I had no idea that actually that was probably about the time you were adopting, but it turned out to be somebody else.
And I didn't say, are you saying I'm fat? I didn't say
I don't remember, but I've never asked that question since.
Well, I remember, because you learn on the, you just, living and learning is very difficult. It would much be better if you could learn and then, but it doesn't work like that. So I remember there was a woman in the audience and I had lots of jokes about not wanting children. And one of my jokes was, I don't know whether I'm going to get a dog or have a child. I don't know whether I want to ruin my carpet or ruin my life. And so I would try to talk to the audience and I'd say, when are you having your baby? And the lady said, I had it 6 months ago. I know, so I never asked that question, ever.
Oh, well, so it's been a 13-year run.
The bet has been great. It's absolutely wonderful because you get to live a normal life in Las Vegas. I know that doesn't sound like something that anyone would say, but you do because you don't take a plane to work. You take a car, and you're there. You're there all the time. And I always said if I was going to be a mother, I wanted to be present. I didn't want to be an absentee parent. I just am flying all around the country. So when Martin and I decided we wanted to adopt a baby in Las Vegas, just fit perfectly into our plans because I didn't have to go anywhere anymore. And then Celine Dion copied me. And she said, now I can be a mother and be a performer.
One of my favorite Rita jokes is the airport.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because Molly going to school in Las Vegas. So but they're too good because I don't say hello. I'm Rita Rudner, dropping people in. So one of Molly's little friends finally said, Molly, I know what your mommy does. And Molly said, really? Because there was a big billboard of me at the airport. And he said, she works at the airport.
Molly is going to be here today.
Yes, but she has a cold and she hasn't learned. One of my greatest talents is that I'm able, even if I have a cold, I'm able to stop my nose from running for the hour and a half I'm on stage. I can just do it, I don't know how. She doesn't have that talent yet. But there's one more. When I was taking Molly to school and I was hanging out at the playground and Molly had this little best friend. And I was always with her father. Her father would pick her up every day. We'd wait for our kids. And it was the end of the year and the father looked at me and said, you know what I just found out? And I said, what? And he said, Rita Rudner's daughter goes to this school.
I think we're going to break to Q&A. I can't thank you enough, Rita. This has been fantastic.
Oh, I'm so glad, but did I talk too much?
No. We want
Yes, raise your hand if you have a question to ask Rita, and I will come to you. All right, here we go.
With a bit of a downer, but you had mentioned Richard Jeni earlier, and
Oh, yeah, let's
about
not do that. Yeah.
the balance between genius and madness. How
Yes.
can you strike that?
One of my best friends, we started together, and he something went screwy. I don't know. I mean, he was always an obsessive personality, and he unfortunately, he took his own life, and that was it. I still can't believe it. I still can't believe that happened. He was so funny, but I don't remember him like that. I just remember him as being just one of the funniest guys ever. He was Martin. Actually, Martin, when we were in Australia, he was one of the first men I was talking to, and I said, Richard, what do you think about me and Martin? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, okay, they got more. And we were just very good friends, and I just don't know what happened. It was very, very tragic. But it's true that a lot of people who are very, very funny have very deep demons. I don't happen to have one, I don't think. Martin? But yeah, he does. I think the fact that I did have such a tragic childhood kind of morphed into this. I do think you do things to overcome adversity, and hopefully you do something productive. Any other questions?
Next question.
Actually, you just answered that one, because I've heard that time plus tragedy equals humor. And I was just going to ask you what you think the percentage of comedians are who've had a history of depression or terrible tragedy in their lives. And Jerry Seinfeld said, no, I didn't have any of that, so you can't lump me in that category.
It's true. He hasn't had any adversity at all. He's one of the luckiest guys that I know. And he's really funny. He's very disciplined. He's just a disciplined guy, and I used to hang out with him a lot in the comedy clubs as well. And everyone always has trouble writing. Writing is a very difficult thing to do. And I said, Jerry, because he was already like a successful comedian when I was starting in the clubs, because I had already had a career as a dancer when I started. And most comedians they're comedians. They start and they don't have this was already my second career. And I said, how do you write? And he said, it's my job. Every day I sit down and I write. So, I said, oh, okay, that's his job. So I guess it's my job. So I thought that was good.